Thank you for being here today. On your Do Now, I was asking you what population pyramids show us. And population pyramids show us population, but it's broken down into categories like male versus female, as well as age group. So we can see where the biggest chunk of our population tends to be. Is it mostly old? Is it young? Is it middle? Is there a lot of male versus female? All right, so with this, you can kind of see the breakdown of the population, but you can also see where the population's going and where it's been. Right? You can use it to make a lot of predictions about the future. So we got this population pyramid here. You can see there's a lot of weird stuff going on in this one, where you know women have kind of a bump in their 30s, but men have a huge bump in their 30s. If we're looking at what this might be caused by, it's like, well, there's definitely a population boom about 30 years ago here, right? Because you can tell women boomed and men boomed, but why would there be so many more men? Well, unfortunately, the reason for this one is that there's a prison in this town. And you can see there's a lot of male prisoners starting about in their 20s. So it's not a juvenile prison, it is an adult prison. And you can see a lot of male prisoners are in this town. Reminder, here's the United States population pyramid. And yeah, how, back in like 50s, 60s, we had a population boom. You can still kind of see it bump out right there. And then there's another bump here. This is the millennials. This was sort of the echo. These people up here had kids, but you can see our population's kind of leveling off. It's not exactly huge. In fact, it's kind of shrinking down a little bit. Each generation is just slightly smaller than the previous one. Which would tell us that our population is sort of shrinking. And it would be if it weren't for immigration, our population would be decreasing. Just a reminder that you can see these different development stages in population pyramids. Stage one, lots of kids are being born, but the death rate is really high. So you don't see that big population in older people. Stage two, you can see those children being born are surviving. The population is staying. It's not just the 0 to 4-year-olds, it's 5 to 10 to 15-year-olds are all surviving. Stage three, the births have leveled off. We got flat sides over here, pretty flat sides, showing that the population and death rate have kind of matched. In stage four, we can see there's some decreases in the birth rate. They're having less kids with each generation. Today, our goal is to look at a few different countries and their population pyramids and try to make predictions as to why things are happening and what will happen. We've already talked about India this week, about their population explosion over the past few decades, the last 50 or so years, and how they've tried to get it under control. We'll go over the three other countries real quick today before we start looking at population pyramids. So we'll start with Singapore, which is a small green country here. It is a very small country. In fact, it's just a city. It's one of those micro states we've talked about, extremely tiny. That being said, it's very wealthy and very developed. It's one of the most developed countries in all of Asia. Has very advanced technology, great healthcare system, great education system, lots of job opportunities. Very big in like the tech field. In the 1980s, Singapore went through a giant boom in development and population growth. This is where things started turning around for Singapore as they got a lot of advanced technology in the 80s and they advanced very quickly. They're a very educated country and they have lots of freedom, lots of personal rights and freedoms. So we can make some predictions about their population that has become very advanced very quickly, but also very educated and very free. So they probably had a big population boom, and now things have really calmed down. Here's some pictures of Singapore in the 70s versus the 2020s. You can see some dramatic changes in their city and how quickly they developed. Went from a small fishing port to this major economic city. Our next country is Bangladesh, right on Next to India, it used to be part of India. Things got very violent. Eventually, Bangladesh got its own independence. Um, this is a developing nation. There's some wealth, there's some healthcare, there's some education, there are some job opportunities, but not for everyone. It is struggling to develop, to modernize, and while it's doing that, it has a lot of people living in slums, living in poverty that are really struggling. Many of the people in this country are extremely poor. That being said, they do have lots of freedom and equality, especially for women. So it's a country that has delivered on political rights and freedoms, but it hasn't delivered on economic wealth. It has a huge population. This is a tiny country, but it's one of the most populated in the world. Um, Absolutely a ton of people. It's also an Islamic country, so that's kind of one of the cultural differences between it and India and why they have conflict and violence between the two is there's some religious and cultural differences. Here's some pictures of Bangladesh. You can see it's got developed cities, um, but it's not quite as advanced as Singapore. Right? The city's not quite as wealthy, not quite as rich, but it's huge. Right? Lots and lots of people, and there's also lots and lots of slums as well. Next, we got Indonesia, which is an island country. It's got thousands and thousands of islands, some big, some small. It's also highly populated, lots and lots of people. It's also developing, so it's in that middle stage where it's getting a lot of access to healthcare, education, all that stuff. It's modernizing. Its death rate has dropped, but its birth rate is still very high. It's also an Islamic country, which is why sometimes it has conflicts with its neighbors as well. There's some pictures of sort of that advance. This is one of their major cities of Jakarta, very developed, very advanced inside cities. But once you get outside those major cities, there's still lots of poverty, not a whole lot of modern technology or advancement. So what you're going to do today, you're going to be working on Schoology. So there's a English and Spanish version on Schoology. For each population pyramid, you need to identify two trends that are happening. What are two things you see happening to population in that country? And then make a prediction about the future. This is a level 3 prediction. So I'm looking for your answer, which is your prediction and why you think it, evidence from the population pyramid, and then analysis. Why is that stuff important? Why is the reason you picked out going to lead to the future you predicted?